What you're seeing is from Kimi K3, a model from Moonshot AI that's open source and open weight, which means you could download it onto your own PC. That is, if you can handle 2.8 trillion parameters. It has a 1 million token context window, which is massive, and I want to explore exactly what makes it special. Let's find out. When I jumped on Twitter, I saw their official blog post here, as well as other things like this benchmark, showcasing how Kimi K3 is essentially beating Fable 5 as well as ChatGPT 5.6 on the front-end code arena. Heading further down, I can see that some people like Theo are already pretty excited to see how it goes in terms of 3D modeling as well as orchestration, which I'm excited to test out too. People are also discovering that it's a lot cheaper compared to things like Fable and ChatGPT, which have a ridiculous pricing when it comes to token use, and they just seem to use a lot more tokens now. Here's the official blog post for Kimi K3, and there's a lot of information here if you want to learn more about it, but I'll give you some of the highlights. Like, here are all the benchmarks for things like coding and general agent use, and usually Kimi K3 is now in the top 3 position. It's even coming in first place for some of these benchmarks, beating out ChatGPT Soul as well as Fable 5, and I'm really interested to test this out in the real world with my own examples. If we scroll down further, we can actually see that its token use is a lot more efficient. Jumping onto the pricing, we can see that 1 million tokens per input is $3 and 1 million per output is $15. Now, if we compare this to something like Fable, there's going to be a huge 3 to 5x difference in terms of pricing that you'll actually be able to afford, especially when you're doing a long-running tasks like people are now with these one props that create entire games or systems or startups. But here you can see some graphs of that, and one of the issues I'm often having is when I'm using Fable 5, I often run out of that 4-hour limit, and I swap to GPT 5.6, which then I ran out of that limit. So having a model that actually can keep on running throughout the whole day would be really useful to me. If you want to start using it, it's already available here inside of Kimi Code, Kimi Work, Kimi the website, as well as their API. And when it comes to open source and open weights, I'm pretty sure it's the biggest model at 2.8 trillion parameters, with the largest behind it being DeepSeek at 1.6 trillion. Actually, I double checked this on Google, and as far as Google AI says, it is the largest, which is absolutely insane. The massive leapfrog it has over the previous models, to a point where I really wonder just how many Mac Minis is required to be able to run this thing. There is some more information here in terms of how it actually operates under the hood. What I'm personally interested in is how it'll go for coding, but as a part of that, I've heard that one of the greater features that it's now capable of doing is game dev and 3D design, because it's meant to have very strong 3D reasoning, coding, and vision capabilities, and there are some great examples to showcase this. Let's have a look at these. The first example from Kimi is this one here that looks like something out of a Red Dead Redemption, an open world with horse riding, rain, water, trees, and much more. What it's doing under the hood is using a combination of vision in a loop as well as coding to continuously check screenshots and essentially build and iterate on a game to get it to a point where it creates something like this cyberpunk Spider-Man-like game. And it's because these models are larger and better with vision that it can do this. Here's another example from someone on Twitter who replicated this 3D game that pulls inspiration from Paper Mario, and it's doing a lot, from not only flipping the character but even making the trees transparent when the camera's too close. Higgsfield AI have made their own comparison between GPT 5.6 Soul and Kimi K3 for a video generated with Seedance 2, and you decide which you think is better based on the same prompt essentially generated by each model. Bridgebench also has this lava lamp test, which Kimi K3 did probably one of the best jobs I've seen so far, even beating the example from Claude Fable 5. Kimi K3 is also pretty good at creating infographic styled reports and presentations. Not something I do as often, but what I really am excited to see is how it goes at creating dashboards and UI elements, because the examples shown were really interesting, such as resizable cards, bento grids, as well as statistics that have their own unique look and feel, because I've been finding the results from Fable and 5.6 to all look the same. Another point of note is that it's pretty good at video editing, from motion design to animation to video editing in general. You see, there aren't really any extensions where AI is jumping into Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve and really helping you with the process. I'd love to see where this goes, because right now in coding we have agents that plan, generate, and even test the code for you, but in video editing that's not quite there yet. If you weren't aware, there's also Kimi Code, which I want to test out with the new K3 model. Kimi Code is like Claude Code or Codex, just its own CLI where you can directly access the model, and it's got its own little harness that works quite well. Let me jump in here and select /model and swap to the latest K3 model. I've got a prompt where I want to try out a 3D web design to create a web page for my Sony FX3, which I'm often filming with, and I'd love to create one of those animated sequences where as you scroll through the page, you get to see the camera unfold into the 3D elements it's made up of. I'm also going to enable YOLO mode, which allows it to keep running without asking me constant questions or to approve different tasks. After running for a few minutes, it generates this here with this 3D mockup of the FX3. This is pretty impressive. I know that some models couldn't even create SVG shapes in the past, and now we've come to a point where they can create 3D mockups just like this. I can expand through each one of these sections, I can click through to any parts of the camera and view more information, and overall this is a really engaging and interactive page. Heading back to Kimi Code, I've got this massive prompt here to create a Game Boy Advance emulator as a web page. After running for a few minutes, it generates this, which is damn impressive. It's built on top of Vite and TypeScript and Three.js using real 3D models, but not only that, it's using a real emulator, and the game you're seeing in there is an actual ROM that's loaded up and playing. If you're wondering how this is possible, I'm doing things like jumping onto SketchLab to grab 3D assets like this one here of a space elevator, and then I grab this URL and jump back into Kimi. I can plug in a prompt, something like this, where I link it to the SketchLab 3D model, and then I ask it to replicate a scene of a space elevator where it's going from Earth all the way to space. Kimi is using those assets, as well as its better understanding of visuals, to create this design for a website using things like Three.js and the models themselves, and creating the space elevator, launching into space itself as it's rising. This really gives you a taste of what's already possible, as well as what the future might look like with how quickly these models are progressing. A big thanks to Kimi for sponsoring today's video. If you want to learn more about them, definitely check them out in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one.